is Totally 80s, the podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. So, turn up your Walkman, loosen that scrunchie, and get ready to talk 80s with your host, Lyndsey Parker.
Hey, I'm Lyndsey Parker, and welcome to a very special episode of Totally 80s. Today, it's a holiday. It's time to celebrate, because on this episode, we are talking all about the undisputed queen of the 80s, the queen of pop, the queen of all media, the queen of my world, her royal majesty, of course, Madonna Louise Ciccone. I mean, there really could never be enough episodes of the show just to cover what Madonna achieved in really 5 years, from 1984, which is when she scored her first top 10 hit with Borderline and set the standard for every VMA's performance to follow with Like a Virgin, iconic, to 1989, just 5 years later, when she released one of her most career-defining albums, Like a Prayer. But she started out in the very early 80s, and she came really from punk roots. So today we've brought together two, what I consider punk icons. They came to discover Madonna in very different ways, but they had their lives forever changed by the woman who really forever changed the course of pop music. So first, joining me today is legendary director Susan Seidelman. You may know her from her groundbreaking first film, the punk rock cult classic Smithereens, or from making Mr. Right, She-Devil, 4 episodes of Sex and the City, including the series pilot, or you may know her from her excellent new autobiography, Desperately Seeking Something. But of course, she was also there to witness, and I would say in many ways facilitate, the rise of early Madonna when she directed one of my favorite movies of all time, Desperately Seeking Susan. So please welcome to the show, Susan Seidelman. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Lyndsey. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to chat with you and kind of create this little mini dinner party of Madonna fans, because also joining us is Laura Jane Grace. Laura is the longtime frontwoman of punk band Against Me and the author of her own acclaimed memoir, Tranny: Confessions of Punk Rock's Most Infamous Anarchist. And this year she released the solo album Hole in My Head and formed the new supergroup Laura Jane Grace and the Mississippi Medicals, who released their EP, Give an Inch. She's also one of the biggest and coolest Madonna fans I know. Welcome to the show, Laura Jane Grace.
Hello.
I am so excited to have you both on at the same time. I mean, I assume you guys have never met, but are aware of each other's work. In fact, fun fact, I know, Laura, you've seen Desperately Seeking Susan many times and actually just rewatched it in preparation for this taping.
I did. I've seen the movie countless times in the past, but I wanted to be sure and be totally fresh on it. So I watched it with my wife last night. Yes.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
So like I said, you guys come from different backgrounds and origins, but kind of the through line here are the punk rock origins of Madonna. I didn't consider her a fluffy pop starlet at all. So, you know, I don't know if a lot of people know that, or they've certainly forgot about it. So I'd love to get the first impressions of when you first discovered her. I know, Susan, you were well aware of her before she ended up being in your iconic film.
Yeah, well, I knew about her because I was living in the East Village at the time. And actually, I was living in Soho before Soho was gentrified, so it was still pretty funky. But she was living down the street. So I knew her as this girl living down the street with her friend Martin Burgoyne at the time on Broome Street. And I was living on Thompson Street. But I had made my first movie, a low-budget indie film called Smithereens. So I was familiar with the kind of punk music scene of that time. And, and she hadn't quite made it yet. This was 1982 when Smithereens came out. But I knew who she was. And then I started, of course, MTV came out, in 1981, I think it started. Mm-hmm. And one of the early, the first couple of years, there weren't that many, music videos. But the ones that were playing on repeat, for example, Borderline, I saw lots of times. And I saw this person that I thought really understood how important the visual impact was of what she was doing. She knew how to play with the camera. She understood that. And around that time, I was about to start making my first bigger budget movie, Desperately Seeking Susan. And we were looking for somebody to cast in the role of Susan. And I thought she might be a great, good idea, not because she was an actress, because she wasn't. I think up until that point, she had done one small bit in a movie called Vision Quest. She was Like, I think her credit might have been girl in band number 2, something like that.
I mean, she was never just girl in band number 2.
Yeah.
I mean, she did Gambler and Crazy for You in that movie, but I know what you mean. She wasn't, I don't
But
think she had any
wasn't like a
lines or anything.
character in the movie. But I had heard that she wanted to act. She was interested in acting. So that's what brought me to her. The thought that she kind of understood, she knew how to kind of work with the camera, and she had a great persona.
I know. We'll get more into the movie, of course, but I think it's crazy. I learned this actually from your book, is that I always kind of assumed that role was written for Madonna. It just seems like who else could have ever played it. So when I was reading that Barbra Streisand and was once literally, I mean, no diss to Bab, she's great, but she's not. She couldn't have done that part.
No.
Or Suzanne Vega, all these people. I'm just like, how was anyone ever else in the running for this part?
Originally, this was, I think when we started casting, it was the summer of 1984. So she hadn't quite, I think it was the MTV Awards that really kind of made her more of a household name. But so this was a couple months before that. So we were really looking at a bunch of those early 80s actresses like Melanie Griffith, Ellen Barkin, Linda Fiorentino, who were just sort of beginning to make a name for themselves. But the studio had no idea who she was. So that took,
crazy.
We kind of had to convince them that she might be right for the part.
Yeah, your instincts were great there. So around that time, when she was all over MTV, I believe one of the videos from that era, Material Girl, was kind of the video that started you on your epic Madonna journey, Laura. Is that correct? Was that the video that did it for you? How did you first discover her, and what was it about her that captured your imagination so much?
Madonna was my earliest musical memory. And I don't remember if it was on TV or what. It was probably, I'm 43 years old. This was probably 1984, 1985. I remember that it was some kind of looked like a live performance and there was people dancing, but it was most assuredly lip sync. And I just remember, I was in my living room in Texas, I think it was, and I was a military brat. And I was just mesmerized. It was my first moment of self-identity where I was that's me. I want to be them. I want to grow up and do that. And I remember also really being totally fascinated with the Material Girl video. When I was young, I thought that they were saying Cheerio Girl, and I loved Cheerios. So I was a song about breakfast cereal. But so again, some of my just earliest musical memories, and have had a lifelong fascination with them, have followed their career, and I'm a fan of all their records, bar a couple of them, but can talk endlessly about Madonna. Yeah.
I feel like if Weird Al Yankovic is watching that and he needs to take that Cheerio Girl idea, as long as he gives you credit, I feel like that could happen. And if I'm not mistaken, your memoir, which I did read when it came out, Laura, doesn't it kind of open? Isn't the first page this faded memoir? It's definitely in the first chapter.
It's in the first chapter. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
So what was it about, looking back now at this fuzzy core memory, what do you think it was about Madonna in particular that kind of, was this lightning bolt for you?
It's hard to say, really, because in a lot of ways, they were breaking down barriers that I didn't even know existed at the time, at the age I was, right? But they just had this ineffable cool to them. And there were certain things that even I think Madonna was probably the first woman with armpit hair I ever saw that challenged my young mind,
Speaking of armpits, nice segue I just did there. But speaking of armpits, I did, I loved reading in your book, Susan, about the making of Desperately Seeking Susan. By the way, there are a lot of Susans we have to talk about here. Yours is Susan. Was she called Susan because of you? Did you name this character after you?
No. I got the script and it had that name in it. And I'm very superstitious. So naturally, when I got a script called Desperately Seeking Susan, and I was nervous about making that transition from an indie filmmaker to a studio filmmaker, I kind of took that as a sign that this was the right project for me. But it came with that title.
It was definitely the right project. And like I said, when I was speaking of armpits, which is something I just throw into conversation all the time, That was improv, the scene where she's, drying her armpits under the dryer. Like that wasn't in the script?
That she used the dryer to dry her face, but not her armpits. So that was an improvisation. But I think that's what interests me about making movies is casting the right people and then giving them the freedom or creating an environment where they can do those kinds of things. And if they work, you keep them in the film. I mean, there's a lot of things people do that you cut out, but that was one of them that just felt so kind of sassy in a fun and great way. I mean, I think that was what was so fascinating about early Madonna, and maybe Laura, what you saw in those early videos was that there was a playful side, but she was also breaking boundaries. She was also being rebellious and making you smile and and being very sexy, but totally in control of her persona. And you felt that, that was something that a lot of female performers or women back then weren't in control of their image and how they wanted to come across. And that was so empowering at the time.
Have you seen the video, the band CSS? They have a song called City Girl that pretty much shot for shot does the scene with the armpits and putting on makeup. The video is probably like over a decade old at this point, but my kid, when they were younger, they were obsessed with that music video and we would just play it on repeat. Yeah. But it's an homage to Desperately Seeking Susan for sure.
I've never seen that. I'm surprised I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'll check that out. But what's interesting to me also is, this movie, we're about to have our 40th anniversary. It was shot in 1984, so that's 40 years ago. It came out in 85. But it's been so interesting to me as I've been doing this book tour, and they've been pairing a book signing with a screening. To see people in the audience, I mean, Laura, I'm of a different generation than both of you. And so, when you make a movie, you never know whether it's going to pass the test of time, whether people who are clearly, many decades younger than I am will still relate on some basic level to what you were trying to say back then. So that's amazing that your 3-year-old self actually recognized something in the movie or in that character that, that affected you.
For sure. You know what really struck me watching it last night too was like Juan Carlo Esposito is in it, who's Gus from Breaking Bad. When I saw that, I was like, wait a second, like that has to have been the slowest burn career rise out of anyone in the cast. But there's so many other people in the movie too that have gone on to do so many interesting things besides Madonna, obviously.
Well, that was what was funny. I mean, it was a unique time because New York was coming out of, in the 70s, New York was really very gritty. So if you look at the punk scene of CBGBs and the Mud Club and all that in the late 70s, it was very different than the mid 80s, where the city was kind of recovering. And I think also the city, people wanted to dance, wanted to be cheerful because there was a devastating AIDS crisis. I mean, the 80s, everyone knew somebody who was sick or who had passed away. And there was a need to be a bit more colorful, a bit more vibrant and political, but to try to be happy, So I wanted, Desperately Seeking Susan to make points about being your authentic self, about self, reinvention and all that. But I wanted it to be happy without being ha ha ha. So that to me was the challenging thing about making that movie, finding a tone that was serious enough to have this message and finding the right actors to pull that off, but not make it silly in any way, because it could have been silly. I mean, it is a screwball comedy, and there's a lot of devices, amnesia and mistaken identity that we're playing with, but in a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of way.
It's also not like a total vehicle for Madonna's music, which I really appreciate. Yeah. Like Get Into the Groove is the only song really featured. And I really like too, there's the reoccurring theme music that occurs at a couple points that's really cool and unique music, but it's not Madonna, you know? So it's like, it's really tasteful in the featuring of like, this is the focus track we're going to put it on. This is the cool dance scene, but it's like underplaying Madonna. Whereas as I feel like if a similar star were to do something now, it would be very heavy handed and it would be like a lot more of their songs crammed into it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, since we're talking about that cool dancing, Into the Groove is my second favorite Madonna song. I'll let you guys know what my first favorite is later, and I want to know yours as well. But it's my second favorite Madonna song, and that scene was filmed in Danceteria. Am I right, Susan?
Yeah.
And I learned also from your book that wasn't supposed to be the song. Like maybe there was not going to be any Madonna songs in the film. Like that was tell me how that came about, because that's like one of her most popular songs.
Yeah. Well, it was written as a dialogue scene where she and the actor Mark Blum meet at Danceteria, and it's sort of a fish out of water scene because he's this straight hot tub salesman, and they were supposed to have that dialogue just standing at the bar, and I thought it would be much more fun to get them up on their feet and moving, and it would also be more comedic if he was suddenly in the midst of all these people that made him feel slightly uncomfortable. So we literally just needed to put temp music. You know, when you film a dance scene, you just put in some temp music when you're filming just to get everyone up on their feet dancing to the same beat, and then you turn the music off and the dialogue continues, never anticipating that we would use it in the final film. But by the time we got done filming, her Madonna star had risen so dramatically that the studio was eager to pay whatever they had to pay to get that song in there.
Money well spent.
Literally, she just came to me the night before and said, "Hey, you need a song. Stephen Bray and I just wrote this song," and she brought in a cassette tape, and we just put it in. You know, everyone started dancing, and that's what happened.
It looks so cool. And that's like the scene, like a scene like that was, I remember, you know, being a young youth, like searching for like little bits of alternative culture because it wasn't all readily accessible as it is now. Like that's the moment that you looked for in a movie where you're like, oh, that person, look how they're dancing, or look what they're wearing. And like everyone just looks so immaculately cool in that shot.
Okay, so there were 8 songs on the first album. She wrote 5 of them by herself. There's no co-write, there's no Stephen Bray, there's no Patrick Leonard. It's just Madonna. And 3 of those songs are Burning Up, Lucky Star, and Everybody. 3 of her most iconic early singles. And I feel like I should have known that, and I feel like more people should have known that, because I don't think, certainly not that time, with her image and everything, no one was marketing or hyping or presenting her as a singer-songwriter, an artist, someone who wrote her own songs, someone who came from the punk scene or a club scene or like a grinding scene. You know, she was sort of presented as just this like, pop starlet. I don't even think to this day people know that. And I, especially Laura, you being a singer-songwriter, I'd love to get your thoughts about her songwriting, the fact that I still don't think she's really gotten the credit for that.
I agree. I also think that like you're underselling their connection to punk, like in that, sure, there's like all the New York City stuff, but Madonna's from Bay City, Michigan, right? And Bay City, Michigan's other big musical export was Question Mark and the Mysterians. Question Mark and the Mysterians, their song 96 Tears, they were the first band ever credited with being referred to as punk in the pages of Rolling Stone. So Madonna and Question Mark and the Mysterians are from Bay City, Michigan, which is technically then the birthplace of punk rock, ironically. There's a great great book called Madonna Land that gets into all that and talks about it. But I've always, I think Madonna is awesome as a songwriter, and I even like used them as guidance for my own career. And then like knowing their association with Seymour Stein at Sire Records, that was the reason why my band signed to Sire, was because I wanted to know Seymour Stein. I wanted to be a part of that, and that was what Madonna did, you know. So
that's funny because I know Seymour because my husband, who started out as a entertainment attorney in London, he's British, was brought to America by Seymour and was the head of business affairs of Sire Records in the early days, in the Dead Boy days, in the Ramones days.
Amazing.
In fact, my husband is the music supervisor on Rock and Roll High School.
Amazing.
So weirdly, Seymour and Madonna and that whole connection is what started our 38-year relationship.
Well, and if you look at Seymour and his taste and like those artists that you're talking about, like I feel like he saw that in Madonna and the connection there. So like I saw his like taste as guidance and like as ultimate word in a lot of ways. And yeah.
It's really interesting that you mentioned Rock and Roll High School, Susan, because I found out relatively recently that movie was not initially written as a vehicle for the Ramones, and there were other bands like Cheap Trick and other bands in the running to be the like band that takes over the high school. And that's another thing where I'm like, how could that movie have starred anyone but the Ramones? How was that not a Ramones movie? So similarly to the Madonna thing, and also sort of tying into Seymour Stein, there's another fun mythology about, he was like in the hospital and he obviously lived, but you know, at the time, I think it might have seemed like maybe, I don't know how serious, but Madonna like was already in talks with him. So she like went to the hospital to like make sure he signed the paper. She was such a hustler.
Yeah, I think there was a guy, I think his name was Michael Rosenblatt. I might be wrong about that, who was the person who took Madonna to the hospital to meet Seymour. And Michael Rosenblatt probably doesn't get enough credit for, you know, there's always people who are making those kinds of connections. But talking about, you know, rock stars, movies being vehicles for rock stars, one of the things that I was a little worried about, as well as the producers of Desperately, was that around the time that we were previewing the movie, you know, showing it to a bunch of teenagers in a, you know, multiplex in Teaneck, New Jersey, and they were all filling out cards about how much they liked it or didn't like it. It was around the same time as Purple Rain. And we were a little bit nervous because this was not intended as the Madonna movie. It's a movie, she's a character in it and she's great. And there's, as you said, one song, but it's not a rock vehicle. It's, you know, and so it started being referred to in the press as the Madonna movie. And we were all very nervous that her music fans would be disappointed because there wasn't more music of hers in it. You know, it was very different than Purple Rain, obviously. Yeah.
Like she had to screen test for this, right? I mean, maybe because of the fact that she wasn't Madonna yet at the time. Yeah. Please tell me you still have the footage of the screen test. Please leak it to YouTube.
It's in a vault. It's in a vault probably I guess through MGM somehow, because Orion Studios got bought by MGM and they have all the raw material. I do have her original screen tests though. I mean, not screen tests, her audition tests where she auditioned with various other actors, like Bruce Willis, who was...
Wait, you have footage of her on screen with Bruce Willis?
I do.
Did they make out? Because in your book, you say she like made out with everyone she auditioned
Yes, she did.
You have footage of Madonna and Bruce Willis making out? Leak it.
A VHS tape. I mean, it's all warped and it's all, you know, it's been sitting in a cardboard box in a hot closet for, 30 years.
That needs to be in the Smithsonian, Susan.
Who
else did she screen test with and make out with on camera?
You know what? I have some of the photos in the book. So if you look at, there's clips in there.
What about the jacket? What happened to the jacket from the movie?
Well, I think one was given... I don't know if one was given to Madonna. I know one was given to Rosanna Arquette, and she apparently gave it away to somebody during a period of time when she was more ambivalent about the movie. Again, because I think there was some, something I talk about. There were some issues. She was hired as the star. She was the up and coming young actress who really green lit the project. It was because of her involvement that we got the money to do it initially. And then it became the Madonna movie. So there was some tension about that. And I think it wasn't only it probably took Rosanna a bunch of years to realize how, important this was to her career and how great she was in it. I mean, I think finally people started talking as much about Rosanna as they were talking about Madonna, and rightfully so.
What is the sub connection to Crocodile Dundee with Mark Blum and Anne Carlisle both being in Crocodile Dundee? Is that just coincidence?
That's coincidence. That's
Right on.
because they were all around the same time. And Anne Carlisle was in a movie called Liquid Sky. That's why I cast her, because I thought she was great in that movie. I didn't cast her because of Crocodile Dundee, but and I don't know whether Mark did Dundee as a result of now getting some acclaim because of Desperately Seeking Susan, or whether it was the other way around.
I'm just happy we got a Liquid Sky mention in here, because I could do a whole other podcast on that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two cinematic 80s movies. There's two cinematic iconic moments for me from that decade that have very much informed my fashion sense, and Liquid Sky is one of them. And the other one is Desperately Seeking Susan. If anyone ever says, like, what celebrity's wardrobe could you raid? I always say Susan Thomas. And since we brought up the jacket, it's not the original one, but I have it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Thank you, Etsy. Thank you, Etsy.
That's a good version. That's
pretty good, right?
Yeah,
The Etsy, the person on Etsy that I'll tag later will be so happy. But wait, there's more, guys. There's more. Since we're talking fashion, which I don't think if you talk about Madonna, you have to mention fashion. I've got the case.
Amazing.
Wait, hold on. Wait, there's more. But when you open it up, it actually looks like, sorry, it's all falling out, but it basically looks like the inside of the case. It's a replica of that.
I thought that case was a subtle reference to the fact that Madonna used to be a drummer and it was a drum case.
Oh, wow.
The boots,
too. Oh, my God.
Now, this was the holy grail. I don't wear all three of these at the same time, except unless it's Halloween.
Yeah.
But I actually wear these boots pretty often. And just, I did not know these existed at the time, but I guess, I don't know what Town and Country was, but I guess it was like a chain shoe shop. I grew up on the West Coast. They didn't have them here, but these were the boots that they made, the official merch boots. And on eBay, Poshmark, Depop. I was looking for a long time for an affordable pair of these, and I wear these all the time. And here's the thing, and this is why I want to get into the fashion stuff now, that I actually was going to wear the jacket to this show, but I thought perhaps it would freak you out, Susan, that I just showed up with all this stuff. So I eased into it.
Yeah.
But this stuff is it's so iconic in that I just feel transformed. I feel like a superheroine, and even if I put on a black sequin jacket, I feel like Madonna in the final scene in the movie theater. Yeah. So I especially Laura, I'd love to get your take, since you were so wowed by the early looks of Madonna, and throughout her career, fashion is, people talk about the fashion with Madonna as much as they talk about anything else. Are there certain looks of hers that, the way these looks that I just showed, kind of stuck with me, that really, influenced you in any way?
Well, first of all, it struck me last night watching the movie that the person in the shop owner wanted $70 for those boots, and that was when was the movie shot again? So comparatively prices, in a secondhand store for those boots, damn.
I paid more than $70 in 2023, unfortunately, but it was, again, money well spent, very well spent.
Right on. Yeah. I think and if you look at me at photos throughout the years, no matter what other changes about me, you will always see an armful of bracelets, specifically the black jelly bracelets that Madonna is sporting in that movie. That was highly influential to me. I really appreciate their sense of reinvention and how they've had so many different looks, and the way they play with that. That's one of my favorite things about Madonna.
It's interesting because I have those same boots as well. I've never worn them. They're in a pristinely kept in a box, the original box.
You could get a lot of money on Depop for them now. I feel we should put on the boots and have a viewing party of the Bruce Willis Madonna audition. Next time I'm in your neck of the woods, I'm just putting it out there. I would actually just fly out just to do that. But it's just all of that stuff was all of her, and I mean this in the best possible way, all of her fashion then looked like it was pulled from the trash or from thrift stores or handmade or DIY'd, and yet all of it looked so fan-friggin-tastic. I was tying, I probably didn't look as good, but I was, tying rags around my head and, ripping up my clothes and wearing fishnet on my arms or whatever, because
I wanted to jump into something you said, and that was that the costume designer on the movie, a guy named Santo Loquasto, literally went to her apartment during pre-production and just looked through her closet, because I have a thing. I don't like when I feel like, especially if it's sort of a punky or new wave movie and you feel like everyone's in costumes, like they're dressed like they're in a Halloween costume.
You can tell when it's, yeah.
It just feels so phony and off to me. So I was very clear that I didn't want to go in that direction. So he went to her apartment, pulled out stuff from her closet, and you can see it in the one scene where she and her friend are sitting outside of the Magic Club, and she's wearing an orange cut-off sweatshirt, and it says MC on it. I mean, most people may or may not know what that was. It was clearly her initials, and it was her sweatshirt from her closet. But when Santo first showed her the pyramid jacket, she didn't like it. That's the interesting thing. She didn't like it. And I talk about that in the book. It looked like a waiter's jacket, like a waiter's tuxedo. And it took her some getting used to. And of course, the pyramid was something, we had this sort of magical theme that weaves its way throughout the whole movie. She wasn't crazy about that. And it's interesting to me that jacket became so associated with her in the 80s.
Oh, I think that you like getting the fashion right though is like essential to what's made the movie like so like hold up, because like if you look at Madonna or if you look at like the other people dressed like in the band, like they still look cool. Like if I saw a band loading into a venue like that today, I'd be like, cool looking band, whereas like Leslie Glass and Gary Glass, like who are, supposed to be rich and upper class, like they look ridiculous and like all the fashions like very dated at this point.
Yeah.
So like that's really interesting. My dream would have been to walk into Madonna's closet in 1984 and just look around. I mean, oh my God, I can't even imagine. But we were talking about how, just in general, she came across as someone who called the shots, who wasn't manufactured, who didn't have like older white record executives telling her, roll around the floor, wear this, do this. That's, put this bow on your head. It's kind of a weird thing to say because obviously she was very sexy, very overtly sexy, and got flack for it, and a lot of flack for it. But I never really thought of her as, obviously, I'm sure lots of men thought she was hot, but I never really thought of her as like playing to the male gaze. Like, I didn't even though she was so sexy and sex positive, it just didn't. I mean, she was like, for kids of the 80s, she was like what Taylor Swift is for a lot of girls now, or what Billie Eilish is for a lot of girls now. Yeah. But I'd love to, get your thoughts, Laura, both of you, about just sort of like, even though she was sexy, it didn't seem like her target audience was for men to think that she was hot. She wasn't like a bombshell in that way.
Well, I'm curious, whose idea was it, the scene where she's wearing stockings and garters and boxer shorts? Like, whose idea was that combination? Hers or?
Again, her in conversation with Santo Loquasto. But so much was taken from her own sense of style. I mean, you feel that. You feel that that she's got her hand in all of that. And for me, because authenticity was so important, I was all for let's find out what she would wear in this scene. That was really important. But getting back to the sexuality, you felt she was in control of her sexuality. She was almost using it like a performance artist. And I feel like that was in part a reflection of the art scene in the East Village, downtown, in the late 70s and early 80s, where you could kind of take something but twist it enough to you're kind of making a social statement about it. You're embracing it. You're embracing the sexiness, but you're also twisting it. Like you're wearing the white like a virgin wedding dress, but you're rolling around on the floor showing your panties. That makes it cool. That's saying, I understand what I'm doing and I'm in control of what I'm doing. And I think that certainly as a woman, or as an artist, people responded to that because you didn't feel like it was, like it was a act, or like it was somebody using this to sell a product.
Laura, do you have any thoughts about that?
I think it's awesome. Yeah, I think it works.
I mean, it is kind of funny to look at, that Like a Virgin performance, or even things like, the Lucky Star video, and that people found it kind of shocking at the time. Because if I show that now to like my 17-year-old niece, she's like, people found the fact that she, rolled on the floor and showed a little bit of like granny panties, like that was scandalous, but it really was at the time. I mean,
well, Like a Virgin. I mean, that was, I understand, I guess, the scandal, right?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, obviously, like later it got, there was the erotica era in the 90s and the sex book and all that, where, she kept pushing it farther. But like, you look back at that stuff now and it doesn't seem so shocking. But, I've tried to impress upon younger people, like this was actually groundbreaking. Like people were kind of up in arms. People protested her shows. People said she was a bad influence. It's kind of crazy. But I'm wondering, Susan, as we've talked about in more in depth, of course, in your book. So when you started making this film, Madonna was on the rise. I don't think that VMA's performance had happened yet, which was, she already had success. She'd already had a top 10 hit or two.
Yeah.
But that blew it open. And of course, I mean, I'm trying to think of the meteoric rise that happened while it was being made. I mean, the only kind of modern day example I could think of is maybe it's similar to kind of like what's going on with Chapel Roan right now. Like within the course of like a few months, it was someone who'd been grinding. Like Chapel's been doing this for a long time. She had a performance at the Governor's Ball and a couple other festivals, and all of a sudden she's got all these top 10 hits. She's everywhere. That in literally the course of 3 months. It was kind of like that while you were making the film, right? I mean,
I absolutely, because I think the video award was in September of '84. That's when we started filming. So she was cast, and I met her where I auditioned her in the summer. So it was a couple months before that performance, and she was. In fact, she was so not well known that she had to fly out to LA and meet the executives at Orion Film Studios because they didn't know who she was. One person, the woman who was the senior vice president of programming, or not programming, of production, had a 15-year-old son that knew who Madonna was and thought she was cute or something like that, and told his mother to hire her, and that kind of helped a lot. But they had no idea who she was. She had to go out there and prove herself to them.
And so her star was exploding during the actual making of the movie.
Literally, it coincided exactly with the start of our filming, and then continued to build as we were filming. I again tell the story in the book. Well, the first scene we shot was on St. Mark's Place. It was the scene where she's walking down the street eating, what is it called? Cheese doodles or whatever, with the little white gloves. We were filming and no one was paying any attention. We just looked like, we had trucks and cameras, but no one, New Yorkers are cool. They don't care. They'd glance over. There were no famous people that they recognized, and they'd go on their way. But we filmed for 9 weeks, and by the end of filming, we needed security to keep crowds away. It happened that quickly, and every day there were more people, on set gawking. But it was amazing to just sort of watch that in real time as it happened.
How was her? We haven't, really talked that much about you. You obviously worked close with her. It can be a mind F to be going through that, having suddenly, I know she wanted it. She had that blonde ambition, but suddenly her career is exploding. All these things are happening at once. And what was her mind like then? Was she fazed by this? Was she like, did her attitude change? Like, did she become more diva-ish as, her fame?
Not to me. I think because I think she trusted me. I think she trusted the material. And I think she knew that this could be really helpful to her. I mean, it was amazing. I think one of the things that happened is just that the fact that she could cross over entertainment lanes, she could have this album that was about to explode and then a movie coming out that also was about to explode. Not that many performers can do that, you know? And I think that they both fed on each other, but I think she was pretty down to earth with me. It's funny, it's sort of like when you know somebody from their past, you know, they still relate to you in some way as that girl that lived down the street, you know? I feel lucky that I got to work with her then because there was no entourage, you know, there wasn't her own makeup and hair person or agents and managers standing around the monitor telling me, oh no, you should put the camera this way or that way. They, you know, they kind of, you know, she just performed and that was that.
That never happened again.
I think it would have been harder to work with her later on. Yeah.
What I think is interesting in the book, you talk about because fame can be so fleeting, particularly, unfortunately, for female pop stars, MTV stars, that the studio was actually worried that she'd be such a flash in the pan, this fad, that by the time Desperately Seeking Susan actually came out, that she'd already be passé. Obviously, they had nothing to worry about. The quite opposite happened. She's one of the most iconic pop stars ever. She's the top selling female pop star of all time. She had this huge tour. She was having hits well into her 40s. Like one of her biggest hits ever is Hung Up. And she was 48 when that came out. And she played Coachella that year. I'd love to ask you, Laura, as a musician, what do you think it is about Madonna, the image, the music, all of it, the whole package deal that has made it so that she wasn't just a flash in the pan in 84, 85. It like, you know, went on for decades and continues to go on. What is it about her that's so indelible?
I mean, you know, I wish there was like a scientific formula that you could copy down and just use, right? But I'm sure it's like that combination of like talent, hard work, focus, and luck, to some extent, you know. But yeah, I think it's like really interesting just in general to beyond Madonna though, looking at like the other people in the movie and seeing like the career arcs they've had, because like, yeah, like the superstar is of course interesting. It's like they're Madonna, right? But like for myself, you know, like I'm more of a working class musician, and it's, you know, less of the like big, huge blow up high. And it's more of the like, you know, oh, that was cool mark of my career. That was a cool thing that happened. And if you look at like all the other people in the movie, like from Aidan Quinn to Mark Blum, Will Patton, like Stephen Wright, John Turturro, like, you know, there's so many people went on to do so many interesting things that it just goes to show you never know what's going to happen and you never know who you're working with. So be cool to people.
I agree with that.
And work hard. That's the thing that I realized. She was a really hard worker. When we did the screen test with her before we started filming, about, a couple of weeks or month before we started filming, she was a little heavier. And I think she thought she didn't look the way she wanted to look when she filmed the movie. And I can remember she would get up in the morning, and it was probably because a Teamster would come and pick her up, maybe at 5:00 in the morning, to go to the gym to swim laps. I don't know how many, but swim laps before she showed up on the set. I mean, I would just kind of roll out of bed at, 7, but she had already done her whole exercise regime because she was really determined and a real hard worker.
That's really interesting you say that because, when I talked about her first of many, many countless reinventions, it was the True Blue era, and people made a big deal when the Papa Don't Preach video. I got my Italians Do It Better shirt from, nod to that era. She was slimmer and, she was wearing that like tight outfit and everybody was like, oh my God, Madonna has shaped up or whatever. And it's funny because if you go back and look at stuff from before that, the Like a Virgin and, she wasn't fat at all. Like the fact that anyone ever thought that she was chubby or needed to lose weight, or that even she thought that, is kind of weird because I thought she looked completely fine, that era. She didn't need, she obviously became this like, Linda from the Terminator, like, arms kind of lady. And that's awesome. But I'm just curious. I wasn't even going to ask about this, but was that coming from her wanting to slim down, or was that
coming from her? She just had an idea about how she wanted to look on film and then worked at it. And literally, it's so exhausting working on a movie. I can't imagine getting up an extra hour earlier to swim laps, before you show up at the set. But that
Wow.
is a testament to her determination.
Well, ambition is, I mean, she had, it was 1990, but coming off to promote her final album in the 80s, Like a Prayer, she had a tour called Blonde Ambition. And we talked about how she was a hustler in all these ways. She really wanted this part. She really wanted this record deal. She was hustling in the New York punk and dance club scene, like for several years. The ambition thing, I've always loved that about her. And Laura, I'd also love to get your thoughts on this, because you're like, I'm a working class musician. So you have that ethos, that ethic to work hard. Is sometimes like people consider that a dirty word, like, to be overly ambitious, I think any of the flack Madonna has gotten is because, she's, because she's kind of this very strong, dominant personality. Like, what are your thoughts about how she was like this, the importance of hard work and ambition? I think that's something to really admire, that she's never made any bones about. Like, there's the famous scene on American Bandstand where Dick Clark asks her, what's next for you? What's your goals? And she says, to rule the world. She like flat out says that. And then she did. She made it happen. But
manifest it.
She manifested it. But it's kind of a larger subject. But like a lot of times when a woman basically says, I want, and Susan, I'm sure you've experienced this as a female female movie director, when there weren't hardly any doing that. Being an ambitious woman is not always like encouraged or seen as a desirable quality. And Madonna made no bones about it.
I actually got in a conversation on Threads the other day with somebody who was talking about Amy Shark, who is a pop singer in Australia. They're a friend of mine. And Amy Shark's manager gave an interview where they were praising Amy because Amy had like woken up at 4 a.m. for 2 weeks straight to do press for their new album was coming out. And this person on Threads was like, stop platforming, that kind of work ethic and like people who grind like that, and hustle culture. And I pointed out, like, don't take away Amy's agency in this, it might not be someone else being like, you need to do this. It's probably Amy being like, I want to do this. I want to work this hard. I want to grind like that. And I've always just admired people who have that kind of work ethic, from, whether it's like Maria Sharapova or Madonna, right? Like people who are just so singularly focused and know what they want. And work at it. Like, as an artist, those are the artists that I will forever idolize.
Was that something you connected with Madonna, Susan? Because you had to be very ambitious. I mean, you made a film, all the things you had to do to make Smithereens, and how that broke everything open for you.
Well, I was very ambitious, but I wasn't ambitious for fame or money. I was ambitious to get the projects that I wanted to make made. I was into like, I want to make things, I want to do things, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that happens. But which is a different thing than than just wanting the end result, money or whatever that is. But I think there's so many obstacles in everyone's path. Let's face it, being creative is not easy. There's no one thinks there needs to be another filmmaker or singer or painter in the world, So if there's something you want to say and that you feel strongly about, you gotta really bust your ass to try to get that out there, because no one's really there saying, oh, we need another whatever. I didn't have a lot of people rooting for me or giving me those opportunities. And I knew pretty early on that if I was going to be able to do the things I wanted to do, I had to hire myself. I had to make my own films. I had to, it's sort of like, I guess, being in a garage band, or Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney in the garage, let's put on a show kind of thing. If you don't do it for yourself, no one's going to do it for you, at least certainly in the start, at the start.
And that's something I've always just liked about Madonna. Like, she was obviously beautiful. She was obviously talented, naturally charismatic in a way that can't be learned or taught. Like, you just have it or you don't. She was a good dancer. She had cool fashion. She had all those things, but so do a lot of people. And some people might be better in some of those areas. There might be better people who are, Celine Dion type singers, or people who have more, dance training or whatever. But she just was gonna make it happen. And I've always really admired that about her. And, it brought us to all these decades later where we're still talking about her legacy. I do want to wrap this up because, I feel like we need a part 2 for this, but we've talked about Burning Up. We've talked about Borderline. We've talked about Into the Groove, of course, but what are some other songs, like maybe deep cuts from the 80s? I'll start that are important to me. I liked Dear Jessie and Causing a Commotion, Where's the Party, Over and Over. Like, Laura, what are some of the songs, besides, it could be the obvious ones, but what are some of the songs that really resonate with you from her discography, particularly her early discography?
Well, as I said, Material Girl, Lucky Star, right? All the hits, of course, right? But if I had to choose a favorite Madonna song, I would say it's Hung Up, actually. Oh. But that being said, also I really think Madonna's last record has some really good songs on it. The song Come Alive and the song Crazy in particular are really great songs. That
was actually something I really liked. I know we're far deep. We're not in the 80s anymore, but Madam X.
Oh, right. Sorry. Totally.
No, it's fine. There's no way you can talk about Madonna without straddling the decades. She's been around for 40 years. But I loved that album in the sense that, sadly, she had when you get to be a certain age, whether you're male or female, it's very hard to still get on the radio if you've been doing this for decades. She actually had a really good run. You mentioned Hung Up. That's one of my favorites. And that was actually her biggest international hit, or one of them. And she was 48 when they came out, and at least 10 albums into her career. But at some point, the radio is not going to play Madonna anymore. And I felt Madam X in the best way possible. It was just a very willfully uncommercial record. It did not seem like a record that was going to get on the radio, and she did not care. The videos were very avant-garde, and she was really just, again, reinventing herself and calling the shots and doing what she wanted to do, whether it was going to be, picked up by the mainstream or not. And I feel like she's kind of always done that. And some of her records have been better than others. Some of them have performed better than others commercially. But I kind of feel like she's always called the shots, and she's still doing it. And I'm so happy that you mentioned that record.
Not.
Cool. So I want to thank you for this Madonna dinner party we had. It was just like a dream come true to put you guys together and talk about Madonna and talk about to show Susan Seidelman my Etsy desperately seeking Susan replica jacket. Before I let you guys go, why don't you fill me in on anything you're working on now? It's shameless plug time here at Totally 80s. What do you guys have going on? Laura, you can start. I know you have a new band that kind of a super group.
Yeah, I'm playing with Matt Patton from the Drive-By Truckers and a drummer named Mikey Erg, who plays in about 1 billion bands, and then my wife Paris as well. And we're going out on tour in 4 days, I think. We tour the Southeast down through Florida, and out for all of September, over in Europe in November, and just finished up recording a record. So lots of things ahead.
Very cool. And what about you, Susan?
I'm on a book tour. I started it in the summer and took a little break in August, and I'm back on the road again in September. So it's been interesting because writing a book is very different than directing a movie. It was a little daunting because you're so alone. You're just sitting there. I started during the pandemic. You're just sitting there with your computer, which is so different than being in such a collaborative art form for 4 decades. I was making movies. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you took a stop on the book tour to have a virtual stop here at Totally 80s. Thank you. This is the book, Desperately Seeking Something, wherever great books are sold. Also, Tranny Laura's memoir is also available, also a really great book. Thank you for opening your hearts and expressing yourselves and speaking with me today. Thanks, everyone out there, for listening. Music makes the people come together, indeed.
This was Totally 80s. The podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. And please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until our next episode, catch you on the flip side.